Welcome to revAMPd, the #1 amputee podcast hosted by an amputee and brought to you by Dilatory Orthotics and Prosthetics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm Brian Mosier, the social media advisor for Dilatory, and I also happen to be a left below knee amputee. Let's get into today's episode. How's it going, everyone? My guest today is a skater who works with the Adaptive Skate Collective. He's also a bilateral below knee amputee. Daniel Edmondson. Daniel, welcome to revAMPd.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about your limb loss story. You had quite the journey from what I've read and quite an amazing survival. When was it that you first lost your limbs?
February 1st, 2014. I was a train accident victim. I was train hopping and slipped and fell and was run over. And so that's how I became an amputee. Wow.
Now, I read in your story that initially you didn't even realize that you had lost your legs. Is that correct?
Well, it kind of depends on when. So, when I slipped from the train, I fell a good, 4 or 5 feet. And so when I hit the ground, it was a little bit of a shock. But then I was immediately being dragged by the train because it didn't just like snip my legs off like a nail clipper. It actually dragged me as it ground down the bone. So while I was being dragged, in kind of dazed after just hitting the ground, and I'm sure I was already in shock, I didn't know. I thought my jacket was caught. I didn't know what it was that was dragging me. And it wasn't until my legs were actually severed and the train, went off into the distance and things kind of got quiet that I kind of, was laying there in the snow and tried to stand up. And it wasn't until I tried to stand up that I realized that both my legs were gone.
Wow.
There was just kind of, it was Minnesota winter, everything's frozen. And then I reached down and my legs are warm with blood. And so, that was the moment that I knew that they were gone. But yeah, and then you're still there's a certain element of shock. So there's certain memories that surface later, the details that you remember after you kind of reinvestigate your history of them. And, but I mean, I knew pretty instantly that they were gone, and not just might need surgery. No, they were detached.
Wow.
By the train. So, yeah.
So what's the recovery like for that? How, from the time of your accident until, you start to get to the point where you're up and moving around, how long does that take you?
It's different for different people. I was really fortunate in that they were able to, well, for one, save both of my knees. My right limb the residual limb is quite a bit shorter than my left.
Okay.
And I was told that they weren't sure if I was going to be stable on a prosthetic, and there was talk of taking my knee on my right side. So I would have been a BK and an AK.
Oh, wow.
But luckily that didn't happen. They kept my knee, and I am a little bit more unstable in the socket on my right side, but at least I have the knee. And so, but other amputees, they might have a lot of revision surgeries or deal with more pain. And I was pretty much just sewn back together, healed really quickly. I was very physically active before, and I kept exercising even though I wasn't on prosthetics yet, just to keep the circulation and try to promote the healing. As soon as the wounds, as soon as it was, okay for me to get my skin in a pool, I started swimming, and just getting exercise, whatever it was. So that really helped, I think, speed up my recovery, plus my willingness to stay on my prosthetics, even when they were painful, learning tricks with socks and pads to make them comfortable, frequent visits to my incredible prosthetist. But for me, I was walking within probably 3.5 months.
Oh, wow.
And then I was on a snowboard within 5.5.
Wow.
So
that's a really incredible.
And I've heard similar. I've heard people who bounce back faster.
Wow.
People that have been on a snowboard, within weeks after getting their first prosthetic. but for me, it was snowboarding was kind of just that real first big accomplishment where I was like, okay, wow, I can still do a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
And that just kind of branched off into skateboarding, surfing, and all this other stuff. But snowboarding is kind of where it started.
Okay. Were you into skating before you became an amputee?
I was. I think that skateboarding, even if you put it down, it's something that's hopefully still in your blood. I skateboarded growing up, but we lived out in the country, so I had pavement in my basement. We had a gravel driveway. We did have a hill in between me and the neighbor friend's house, so I would sometimes skateboard down that hill. It was slow, it was nothing major, but I was comfortable on a skateboard, and I skateboarded, used a longboard in college for transportation. There was a skate park by my work when I was in my early 20s, so I would go there, but I was never trying to do any major tricks. I just kind of wanted to carve the park, just kind of surf the park, so to speak.
Okay.
It wasn't really my ambition to become a great skateboarder. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. And it wasn't kind of rebirthed as a passion until I rediscovered it after my amputation.
Okay. Nice. So when you got your first prosthetics, what's that first step for you like when you're on both of your prosthetics and you're walking? What's that like for you to start walking again?
Just the feeling of independence,
Okay.
And it was definitely, for the first, I was with a different prosthetist before. I had a different foot. I didn't quite yet know what I didn't know, which is common for new amputees unless they've been connected with a peer group,
Right.
or a support group in their area, other nonprofits, people to reach out. So, for me, it was a little clunky at first, as it is for everybody. Learn how to walk with a cane and stuff. But actually, what really helped me kind of relearn a lot of my balance was getting the right prosthetist, getting the right socket fit, getting the right foot, and then doing things like flow arts, like juggling or hula hoop, or fire poi, where your kind of mind is engaged in this physical task, and you're kind of distracted from your legs, because that's the thing, is a lot of it is when you're first learning how to walk, you're very, very conscious of where is my foot on the stairs, or going down this little ramp, or you're very conscious of what your feet are doing. And I think the trick is doing an activity that takes your focus away from what your feet are doing, where you almost kind of just have to expect that they're going to react the way that they should. And runners kind of say the same thing. They say you kind of just want to remember what your old stride felt like and try to go for that. Just try to ignore what the prosthetic is doing. Just run the way that you always did.
Okay.
And so a lot of that was that for me, is trying things that took my mind away from what my legs were doing, so I could focus on the activity that was engaged in, whether that be, skateboarding is obviously tricky, but, the hula hooping and the flow arts, fire hooping and staff and stuff like that it's all core balance training. And so that really helped as well.
Tell me about your experience with Rush Foot.
I love it. I was approached by a prosthetist in the hospital. And like I said before, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So a lot of these companies, they find out, they get word that there's a new amputee in town, and they show up at the hospital and they say, "I'm your prosthetist." They don't ask you, "Can I be your prosthetist?"
Right,
they just kind of announce it.
Yep.
And so, you don't know what you don't know. So I went along with it. And I kept saying, I really want to get more active. I want to try to recertify for my lifeguard certification, because at the time I was very heavily involved in aquatics. And I believed that I would be able to recertify as an amputee. So I told my prosthetist, I want non-electric. I want something I don't have to charge. I want something that I can put in the water, and something that's comfortable. And they were trying to steer me towards this path of this, electric foot with an electric pump. And I'm like, it's not what I asked for.
Right.
And then I started hearing about the Rush Foot, and I started seeing examples of skateboarders on the Rush Foot. And I'm thinking, I want to skateboard again. And so I went to my prosthetist and I said, I really want to try this Rush Foot. And they had told me that they would, give me, they would let you do a 60-day trial for free. They'd send the foot to your prosthetist, and if you don't like it, you can send it back. And so I asked him for that. And my prosthetist then told me, "No, that's not what you want." And that's when the light bulb went off in my head. I was like, why is my prosthetist making decisions about my body?
Right.
Like this person works for me. I can switch prosthetists. So that's basically what I told them. I said, I want to try this rush foot. You keep putting me in stuff I don't like. I'm not getting good socket revisions. You're not my prosthetist anymore.
Yeah.
And so I went to someone else, and it was Tilgis in Minneapolis. And they're like, yeah, rush foot, no problem. Here it is. Here you go. And the thing is that they had said, well, you don't need a new foot. We already gave you a foot. Your foot isn't broken. Your foot works. You can walk. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not walking comfortably. It's not, I didn't know before that I had options. Now that I know, I want to try them. And when I zeroed in on the rush foot and tried it, and I'm very mechanically minded. And when I did the research, it just even just watching the slow-mo of the stride difference between a carbon fiber foot and a rush, that soft heel strike, the rollover on the toe, eliminating those 2 points of contact. So you're not feeling like you're walking on a cinder block. I'm not worried about breaking it. It's, for me, it's great because I can trust it. I know the outcome. I feel less pressure in my socket because it doesn't shift as much, because you eliminate those 2 points of contact. And so, I'm definitely, endorse the rush foot, but I also advise people what works for me might not work for you.
Exactly.
I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, you're an amputee. Have you tried those running blades? And I'm not a runner. If someone gave me running blades, I'd probably donate them to somebody else that wanted to use them. I can run on my rush foot. If I need to cross the crosswalk before it goes red, or catch a bus, or, do whatever, I can run. But it's I don't run for sport. I don't run for exercise. I get on my bike, or I go swimming, or on the kayak, or go skateboarding. So, I'm not a runner. So why would I need a running blade?
Right.
So what works for me might not work for other people. But a lot of the people that I know that have tried other feet and then try the rush, and there's always a period of, you've got to overcome your preconceived notions because of what you're used to. So you got to give it a week or two to really start to feel the difference and because you're learning how to use a new piece of equipment.
Right.
You wouldn't just get on a brand new snowboard and say, oh, I don't like this one because it's not like my old one. Well, maybe you just need to break it in. Maybe you need to get used to how it handles, and then you'll realize that it's smoother. So I urge people to just try their options. If there was something else that came out of the market, whether it was a new foot by Rush, or another foot that was something that I recognize as a good design, I'd be willing to try it, because I like Rush. I love what they're doing, but I'm not married to the product. That's the kind of the beauty of being an amputee, is we're all mix and match, some assembly required.
Right.
There might be a new socket system that I love that maybe I'll try that, but maybe, but for the foreseeable future, I think Rush has kind of got this one in the bag. The industry got blindsided by using carbon fiber because of its, properties. But I think that they kind of had their blinders on, and they were focused on perfecting the carbon fiber foot. And I think they've done that several times over. It's just, they were working with the wrong material.
Absolutely.
So I think that Rush Foot's got a great product, and I would advise people to try it if they haven't. If they're curious, you can ask your prosthetist to try a product. If they tell you no, they're lying.
Right.
So you gotta be your own advocate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was in a couple of, carbon fiber feet before, and, my process said, hey, would you be interested in the Rush foot? And, I think I kind of had those preconceived notions like you talk about. And I was like, I don't know, maybe. I said, I'll think about it. And I started doing some research, and I started talking to people, and I was like, yeah, I've got to try this. And so I tried the 87, or what's called the High Pro now, and I loved it. And it was a game changer. And then when the Rogue came out, I said, I've got to test this. And so I went to our rep and I said, hey, I want to test this foot. And they set it up. And that was a life changer. And so I have the Rogue and absolutely love it. Like you said, they've got it for right now. They've got me. And if something ever better comes out, maybe, but right now this is the best for me, for my situation. And,
absolutely.
Which is why I stick with Rush.
Yeah, it's a good product. I'm loving it. I'm happy that I found that early on, and I'm glad that I stepped up and to be an advocate for myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just in the component side, but also the medical side, because they send you out of the hospital with all these prescriptions, and I've heard so many horror stories of people getting addicted or being on their medications too long, or dealing with a lot of depression and getting on a lot of anti-psych meds and behavior meds. And the longer you're on that stuff, the more consequences it has on your body and your mind. And so for very early on, I was like, I remember they gave me a stack of pills in the hospital. And when I was kind of with it mentally enough to say, what are these? And then they're like, oh, well, this one's for this, this one's for this. And then all the ones that I deemed unnecessary, I said, take me off of them. I don't want them anymore.
Absolutely.
And then once I could handle the pain management, I started, weaning back on the pain meds they were giving me. And then I had opportunities. Like there'd be months later where like my leg would start hurting again. I would think, oh, I can go to the doctor and get some, hydrocodone or something. But in the long run, I just don't like the way my body feels on it. It messes with my stomach. It doesn't really help the pain for me. And I think that that's something that people need to be aware of as an advocate too, is that it's not just prosthetists putting the equipment that they want on you. It's also the doctors giving you their version of the advice when like you should be doing your own research. And that's not just for amputees. That goes for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We are the best advocates that we have. And I think people should definitely remember that and advocate for themselves. So
it's difficult when you're new though, because you're still healing emotionally and you don't know what you don't know. So it's important to get connected with a peer group and people with similar interests.
And, you mentioned a peer group, and, one of the things, when I first became an amputee, I didn't know anything. And, like you said, the prosthetist comes in and they're like, hey, we're your prosthetist now. And what did I know? And, and I went and they were whatever, they were all right. And, but I didn't know anything about peer groups or amputee coalition or any of this stuff. I didn't know that I had choices when it came to, to what kind of leg I ended up with or anything. And, it was like, like baptism by fire, they say. And so I learned, and then, we moved back to the Pittsburgh area, and I linked up with a new prosthetist, and by then I know things, so I've been able to be very involved and fine. So I'm all about it. I think people should absolutely advocate for themselves and not just, if a doctor writes you a prescription, not just say, okay, I'll take that. Be like, well, why am I taking this? And, people need to ask questions and things like that.
Well, that's one of the good things about you doing this podcast, is that, I'm lucky enough, I live in a metro area. So there are people near me. I don't have to drive 4 hours to my prosthetist. I know people who do.
No, absolutely.
And so you might be, way out in the country and not have any peers around. So that's a tricky part too. And especially when you're in the hospital and you wake up, like you, as someone who's not part of the disabled world, if you don't have like someone in your family that's disabled, or you personally have never had any interaction with it, or you've never, volunteered at groups that help the disabled or anything like that, you might have still seen, like everyone sees around, there's always around Olympic season, they always kind of show snippets from the Paralympics. It never gets the right coverage it needs. Right. But like you've seen examples of active amputees. So you know that there are amputees out there on great prosthetics doing high jump and stuff like this. But when you wake up in the hospital as an amputee, it's almost like you've forgotten all of that. It's almost like all those examples that were shown to you in social media and society, it's like you forget them. And it might be, Mike Schultz in the front of a Frosted Flakes box. But after you become an amputee, you forget that you've seen it because you don't know how to get from where you are to there.
Right.
You don't even know what standing looks like yet. So it's, you in the back of your mind, that these things are possible, but it's finding your path to them.
Absolutely. So tell me about the Adaptive Skate Collective.
I think I owe a lot of my outlook and kind of new approach to life to the Adaptive Skate Collective. It is a relatively new nonprofit organization, but we still have a lot of growing to do because skateboarding is a niche, and skateboarding never really takes itself too seriously, or at least strives to have that attitude. And for me, it was when I talk about a peer group, here in Minnesota, there's Wiggle Your Toes,
right?
Which is a phenomenal group. I've been to a lot of their outings, a lot of their dinners. They provided me a grant for the coloring book that I published. Good friends, great people. All the snowboarding opportunities I've had since I became amputee were through them, and also through Courage Kenny Rehabilitation. But skateboarding is just, it's for some reason as an amputee, I think the reason that I chose skateboarding is because I honestly thought it was going to be the hardest thing to do.
Okay.
Because I had examples of someone missing one leg and being a skateboarder, and Joel Goltry, who was a Minnesotan before he moved to Arizona. He found me, as a new amputee. He heard of me as a new amputee here in Minnesota, and he reached out and he said, "Hey, I'm doing this snowboarding thing. You should come." And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm worried about it. I'm still in pain." He's like, "Just come, even if you just go on the bunny hill. Like, you'll just get out and meet people. And trust me, it's what you need to do." And so I went and I snowboarded with him. And then when I finally had my first successful run from top to bottom, and the light bulb went off, I can snowboard. Then the next day they're like, "Come to the skate park." And so, when I stood on a skateboard with two prosthetics, if you're in a snowboard boot, it's a relatively stiff boot. And actually snowboarding doesn't feel all that different to me as an amputee, but skateboarding it's a lot of ankle control, and I don't have either ankle. So learning how to stand on a skateboard again and relearn that balance, I kind of set that as the high bar. And I was like, I'm going to learn how to skateboard again. Because it was the hardest thing to do. And the Adaptive Skate Collective connected me with the coaches, with the people who had been there, examples of people who skate different ways, kneeling, sitting. And so it kind of really opened up my eyes to how much possibility I had in skateboarding. And then, there's peer groups and peer networks, but they're my friends. These are the people that I love going on trips with, and we go out to, the WCMX and Adaptive Skate World Championship together. We do clinics together. We also visit other, adaptive camps, and do demos and clinics, and it's become a really big part of my life. So I'm glad that I've found that network. And since I've joined, we've brought in a lot of new people. And one of them here in my hometown is actually over on the St. Paul side, but Sam Selly, we found him right after his amputation. And actually Joel knew him before his amputation. But he's just, a huge skateboarding nerd. I mean, he knows everything there is to know about skateboarding. And so when he woke up in the hospital, "Oh, I'm never going to skateboard again." And we were right there "Hey, we're the Adaptive Skate Collective, and yes, you can. And since then, I've watched him progress. So I've already been through kind of my own, cycle of it. And now I'm starting to see other people that have kind of another one is Austin Sparks out of Kansas City. He had been an amputee for, I think, a couple of years before he found it. And he'd been skateboarding on his own as an amputee and didn't know it was a thing until we had connected. And now he's joining us on trips and doing these things and pushing the limits and learning new things. And skateboarding is one of those things that if you are a skateboarder, it's part of your identity. And so, when I represent Ask, when I put on an Ask patch or slap a sticker somewhere, it's, I feel a personal connection to it. And so it's been a great organization to be a part of.
Now, you mentioned that they gave you a grant when you did your coloring book. Tell me about the coloring book that you published.
Well, it was Wiggle Your Toes that gave me the grant.
Okay, sure.
I approached them, and it was my second winter as an amputee, and I was still kind of dealing with a little bit of depression, and just kind of accepting the limb loss. And I started drawing as a coping tool. And so I started doing, pop culture icons. So I did Lisa Simpson hula hooping, but she's got a prosthetic leg. Or I did Sonic the Hedgehog, but he's got running blades on. Just redoing these pop culture cartoon character type of things with amputations and prosthetics. And then I drew Bart Simpson, in the air on a skateboard with a prosthetic leg. And then the light bulb went off, oh, I need to draw my friends. So I started drawing Matt and Joel and Colleen and just other people in the skateboarding world that I knew that were part of the adaptive world. And then I started drawing more and more and more. And then it got to the point where I had 20 to 25 pages. I'm like, I totally need to publish this. And the book does feature adaptive skateboarders, but it doesn't say their name. It doesn't say what disability they are. A lot of their disabilities in the book are even hidden. Like the very first page of the book is Justin, and Justin has orthotic brace on one leg and a prosthetic on the other, but he's wearing pants. He's missing both arms below the elbow. So like you look at the drawing and it's like, oh, he's an amputee skateboarder, but you can't see in the drawing that he's not just an arm amputee, he's also a leg amputee. So the point that I was trying to make is that, not all disabilities are visible, and, I don't need to point them out. There are actually people in the book who are able-bodied, people that were connected to the project, people that were supportive. There are some able-bodied people in the book. So people will look through the pages and they'll say, oh, what's this person's disability? And I'm like, well, they don't have one. And I would argue that the person on the next page is the same. Like these are active people living their lives, prosthetic or no, or disability or no. Like these, to me, I just see them as skateboarders. And that's the beautiful thing about skateboarding. When I go to the skate park, it's very rare at the skate park that people come up to me and ask what happened to me. The people at the skate park are usually just like, oh, that's totally cool that you skate. Nice to meet you. And they just see me as a skater. They don't see me as someone with a disability. But so the book was a project that once I kind of got the idea in my head to draw this thing, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I had a tight deadline because I really wanted to get it out before Christmas. I wanted to get it out. And the goal was, I was drawing as a coping tool. And I thought, how great would it be, if I was in the hospital and someone came to me and said, here's the peer visitor group in your area. Here's the network. Oh, by the way, here's this gift of a coloring book. Because they say that when you're coloring, your brain waves are on par with meditation, which is an important part of learning how to heal, because you're not just healing physically, emotionally, mentally, you're also healing subconsciously. For me, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. I truly think that that your rational mind and your subconscious mind both need to be on terms, right, in order to truly accept the limb is gone. And I think that people whose subconsciouses haven't quite accepted the limb loss, I think that's where, like for me, once that started to happen, my phantom pain started to go away.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that was a sign that my subconscious was recognizing, okay, the limb is gone, and learning to deal with that. But I figured the coloring book would be a great art therapy tool. I wanted it to get in the hands of new amputees, so that they could look at it and say, oh, look at these cool examples of people doing high active, dangerous sports, skateboarding, and having that example and being reminded, like I said, you've kind of forgotten all the examples because you don't know how to get to here from there. And like, I feel like if I were to sit there in the hospital or bring it home and then color this book and have these examples, and not written examples, not stories, not YouTube channels, like a page that you're engaged with, you're actually coloring. And that was the goal for me, is I wanted it to help new amputees get some perspective, help with the healing process. And if they're into skateboarding, maybe help connect them with that network. So that was my ultimate goal, is I wanted it to reach its intended audience. And to me, its intended audience was people who were still in the healing process of amputation.
Very nice. So we talked about, you skate and that you snowboard. What are some of the other activities that you enjoy doing?
Well, 10,000 lakes, more than that in Minnesota. I love kayaking.
Okay.
So I bought a canoe one year, and it was hard because I love going out on the water, but I always had to find someone else to paddle with. And so I swapped it for a kayak, and I can be on a lake in 15 minutes.
Nice.
Throw it on the roof rack, bring it over the lake. And it's one of these things where I can get exercise and I can be outdoors and I can have great scenery and like see the leaves change on the shore, but I can take my legs off. So it kind of became this thing. Like when you become an amputee, you want to accomplish as much as you can on your legs.
Right.
And there comes a point where you realize, oh, there's stuff I can accomplish without them. And so, I mean, skateboarding is the same way. I take my legs off sometimes when I skateboard. But kayaking is one of those things that I really enjoy because it gets me outdoors. I love playing music. I'm a drummer. I'm still a drummer. So like using the pedals, the hi-hat, the double bass, just playing with my prosthetic. I consider myself a bit of a Renaissance man, but it's also a double-edged sword because I have too many hobbies.
Okay.
And I have to kind of decide which ones I'm going to invest my time in.
Absolutely. What are you involved in locally? In your, like, within your community?
Well, with Wiggle Your Toes, I attend a lot of their events, and I've done a little bit of peer visiting with when I find out that there are new amputees in the area, whether it's I just reach them out on social media or I've actually visited a few in the hospital. But we also, I did one skate clinic up here in Minnesota for Ask, where we invited the disabled community and their parents and brothers and sisters out to the skate park out here. And I'd love to be able to do more about that. Part of it is just like with the coloring book is fundraising. We're a relatively small organization. We're not as established as some other nonprofits. But I'm hoping to have those clinics be an ongoing thing. Because we had a lot of kids come out that really enjoyed it, and we'd love to see them return and progress. Because we go to these adaptive skate events, and we're like, it's all people my age or mid 20s, and into their mid 30s. But we go to these events, and there's a ton of WCMX kids, all ages. But we don't see all ages in the adaptive skate world. We don't have we'd love to build it to the point where there's actually youth competition in adaptive skateboarding, because it's always the adults. So one of my goals is to try to, fill out our clinic roster, so that we can breed new blood in the adaptive skateboarding world and keep the sport growing and get younger people interested in it. Because the thing is that not every kid with a disability aspires to be a track and field star. Some of them are into grunge music and, want to get a tattoo when they're 18 and learn how to skateboard. We want to make sure that there's an outlet for those kids.
Absolutely. Who or what inspires you?
Man, my Facebook feed, my Instagram is full of people, and there a lot of them are people I've met in person, and I'm really fortunate for that. I've been to 2 Amputee Coalition conferences. I've been to all these different adaptive events, so I've gotten the chance to befriend, some Paralympians, some people who are really active in the amputee community. And the stuff that they post is that's what keeps me going. It's just seeing that everyone else is also having a good time, and engaging other people. And, but I think what really motivates me is, I had a very quick turnaround in recovery. And for me, positivity, even though I dealt with some depression here and there with this, accepting the limb loss, for me, it was positivity from day one, so whenever I'm engaged and involved in the community and I just get the happy feeling, that's really what motivates me. I get to look forward to the next fun thing. I'm already Minnesota's starting to get cold and people are complaining. I'm looking forward to snowboard season.
Yeah, absolutely. So, every day I talk to amputees and, amputees that I work with, and some of these people, they're struggling mentally, physically, emotionally, with being an amputee. I often hear people say, oh, my life is over. And, sometimes it's hard to convince people that that's just not true. I mean, obviously they have to discover that for themselves as they heal. But what advice or encouragement would you give to other amputees who are kind of trying to find out where they are and looking to take their life back?
Redefine it. I lost both my legs. There are certain things, I hate to use the word disabled, but there are certain things that I cannot physically do anymore.
Right.
Even just like basic yoga poses, like I can't kneel the way that I used to. And so it's redefining success. And it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of accepting a lower bar. It's keep the bar at the same height, just redefine it. So if skateboarding is a good example, because my goal was to relearn how to skateboard. And it wasn't until I realized that I could take my prosthetics off and embrace skateboarding a different way that I really started to progress. That's really what kind of shot things into the stratosphere for me is I was so much more stable and so much easier handling on a skateboard when I took off my prosthetics. And the thing is like, you think, I'm going to need these things for the day to day, but you can find happiness without having it be on your legs. And you might, amputees, come out and they end up changing careers. They end up changing, they find that, they lose some friends. They gain new ones. Things are going to change and that's going to happen again and again and again. And so for me, it's not lowering the bar, it's redefining it. It's a struggle because to get a lither personal, I recently listened to your story with Aaron Ball, the circus artist.
Yes.
And her and I are friends on Facebook and Instagram, and we talk a lot. But I listened to your podcast with her, and our stories were actually kind of similar because before my accident, I was in a very bad relationship. She became physically abusive towards the end. She broke my nose. I didn't even know that it was broken until the hospital x-rayed me after my amputation and told me that I had a remodeled nose fracture. Wow. But, I was, so that was a year and a half, 2 years of living with an alcoholic and seeing things get worse and worse and enabling this person. And it's like, I was kind of for a year and a half leading up to my amputation, dealing with a lot of despair, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. And so when I woke up in the hospital, I was just done feeling that way. I didn't see how any of that was going to help me after my amputation. And I was just like, well, I'm just going to put all that down, put it all behind me and just like focus on the future. And I think that if you were in a good place when you had your amputation, it feels like you were knocked down. But I was in such a horrible place leading up to my accident that it's just like, I just couldn't waste time on feeling that way anymore. It was all, move forward. And so I think it takes people different timelines on how quickly they come around to that, like redefining the goal. And you kind of have to relearn how to be happy. And with me, with a train accident, if you lost your leg because of cancer or an infection, you can blame that cause. You can say, oh, well, screw this cancer that took my leg. But I don't have anything to blame other than myself.
Okay.
I jumped on the train. It was my decision, and I think that there is a section of amputees that deal with that, whether they, got tossed from the windshield of their car because they drove drunk or, or they weren't taking care of their bodies or I don't know. If you put yourself in harm's way and had an amputation, there's also a certain level of personal guilt.
Right.
Because you can't blame anyone but yourself for what happened to you. And so that's a difficult thing to do. And I think that for amputees of that are kind of went through the same thing I did, that you really have to learn how to forgive yourself and put the past in the past. Absolutely. Especially if your accident or amputation, like what truly was your own fault. And you have to be able to accept that and accept yourself and start loving yourself, because I know people, and not just amputees, that the moment they start feeling happy, they'll think, oh, well, I don't deserve to be happy because, of this and this. Or if you are happy, if you're starting to feel happy, don't give yourself excuses not to. you can embrace the sadness, or you can embrace being happy, and you can stay happy as long as you want. For me, after losing my legs, it was very clear to me that it's up to you to decide how happy you want to be in any given moment. You could be in line at the DMV and be like, well, I'm here, but it's up to you. You define your mood. Right. And that's not always easy. It takes practice, just like anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that. So today I've been talking with Daniel Edmondson, and for more information about Daniel, connect with him on Facebook, daniel.edmondson.908, and give him a follow on Instagram at Daniel J. Edmondson. Daniel, thanks for taking time out of your day to join me on revAMPd. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, and I had a great time talking to you.
You've been listening to revAMPd, the #1 amputee podcast hosted by an amputee and brought to you by Dilatory Orthotics and Prosthetics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you've enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review on iTunes or give us a like on Facebook. I'm Brian Mosier. I invite you to visit our website, www.revampedpodcast.com, and connect with us on Facebook at revAMPd Podcast.